Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We are having folks gather in our audience, and we are going to get started in one quick minute. My name is Kara Bujdani. I am going to be your moderator for today's meeting. And if we'll just allow a minute or two for people to gather, I will get everything started in 1 second. All right, we will go ahead and get started. So we want to kick our meeting off with a welcome from Kathy Zahul from the Georgia Department of Transportation. Kathy?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Kathy Zahul, and I serve as Georgia Department of Transportation's Assistant Director for Strategic and Systems Planning. On behalf of GDOT and our incredible study team, I would like to welcome you to this virtual public event, this live virtual public event, and question and answer session. Before we get started, I want to introduce or reintroduce you to a relatively new acronym in the transportation community called PEL, P-E-L. PEL stands for Planning and Environmental Linkages, and it's a delivery framework that was developed by Federal Highway Administration. The goal of PEL is to incorporate community and economic goals and environmental considerations early in the transportation planning process, and by doing so, PEL aims to create a more unified decision-making process, resulting in less duplication of efforts and more informed project-level decisions. Jonathan's going to talk about that more in the presentation, but I wanted to just reiterate, the reason why we're here. And with that in mind, your participation and input are absolutely critical to the success of this process. So we greatly appreciate your participation and input as we work together to achieve the following goals for I85 throughout Gwinnett County: improve safety, improve vehicular mobility, facilitate commercial travel, evaluate multimodal options, support Georgia's economy, and support the corridor's communities. We now look forward to hearing from you today as we continue to move this study forward, and I'll hand it back to Kara.
Thank you, Kathy. We're very excited to be here with you today to tell you about the study. And throughout the upcoming slides, we're going to provide you with some background information on the study. We're going to give you a progress update, and then we're going to guide you through how to navigate the virtual public meeting rooms, and most importantly, how to get your feedback. Also, in case you're not familiar with the term PEL, which you just heard about, we are going to talk more about it in the presentation. So this is an hour-and-a-half virtual public meeting. For everyone's benefit, we have a few ground rules to ensure we maximize your time and answer your questions accurately and thoughtfully. During this session, you will be on mute to reduce the risk of background noise. However, throughout this session, you can submit questions using the Microsoft Teams live Q&A feature. We urge you to keep your questions concise and specific to this project, and also please use appropriate language. After the presentation, I will read the questions for the project team to respond to. Please note that we may group similar questions together. And if we don't get to your question, or the question involves a more detailed technical response than we're able to provide today, don't worry. We will follow up using the contact information you provide. So please keep in mind that if you use the option to ask a question anonymously, we don't get to your question today during the session, we won't have a way to contact you back. So please provide your name when submitting a question. Also, please note that all comments submitted will be part of the public record. Because this is a virtual public meeting, it's important that you're tethered to a strong Wi-Fi or a reliable wired connection. But if you get disconnected, don't worry, you can always log back into the session. A recording of this session will be posted on the website listed below by Thursday, September 2nd. If there are any elected officials joining us today, please send us your name and office in the chat for our records. Also, don't worry about memorizing these tips. We will repeat them later in the session. For your convenience, we have also set up a closed captioning in multiple languages. So to turn it on, simply navigate to the bottom right of your screen to the closed caption icon. Click it to turn captions on or off. And then to change the language, click the gear icon next to it and select Captions, Subtitles to choose a language. Also, if you are more comfortable asking questions in another language, please feel free to call one of our designated numbers. Note that these are not hotlines. You will be asked to leave a voicemail and someone will return your call. So now we're going to get to the purpose and agenda of our meeting today. And as we've shared, we will be giving project updates and then also getting your feedback and ideas. We want to hear from you, and there is a survey in our virtual platform for you to complete. As for today's meeting agenda, we've already gone over the tips for navigating the meeting. Next, we will start with some background on the study and an explanation of Pell. Then we will talk about the study timeline and where we are so far today. We will also go over project alternatives, and then we will guide you on navigating the virtual public meeting rooms. And finally, we will give you an opportunity to ask questions. We may move quickly through the slides because we want to allow ample time for your questions at the end. But please don't hesitate to send us questions throughout the presentation and add comments into the chat box. Now I would like to introduce Jonathan Langley, the study team project manager. He will walk us through today's study background and provide status updates. Jonathan?
Thank you, Kara. Good morning, everyone. We know that some of this information may be new to you, so we're going to start with some high-level background for the study. If you have any questions, there will be a live Q&A after today's presentation. I'm sure it's not surprising to hear that the I85 study corridor is one of the busiest interstates in Georgia. It is also an important corridor for freight travel. The statistics on the screen help to put it all in context. The corridor has over 300,000 vehicles traveling through the study area every day, and it continues to grow. It is an incredibly important freight corridor with more than 11% of all traffic being commercial vehicles. North of SR 316, trucks make up 16% of vehicles. When we think about commuters, an important element is travel time reliability. Commuters need to plan an extra 10 to 30 minutes of travel time to be sure they arrive at their destination on time. And nearly a third of drivers are traveling locally within the corridor. So 30% of travelers exit within 2 exits of where they entered I-85. Simply put, there is a lot going on in this corridor. There are many types of roadways, principal and minor arterials, collector distributor lanes, and state highway routes that connect and link communities to large employment centers, educational facilities, retail districts, and recreational areas within the corridor, and of course beyond. I-85 is a key conduit in the quality of life for these communities. The I-85 study area runs roughly 18 miles along I-85 from 285 to I-985. Within the corridor, there are 3 CIDs and it connects with 5 cities. The corridor contains 16 interchanges and ranges from 4 to 6 general purpose travel lanes in each direction, and 1 high occupancy toll lane in each direction. Sometimes we call these hot lanes. It also includes the programmed McGinnis Ferry Road interchange. At times, morning congestion can stretch up to 11 miles, and this congestion can contribute to crashes and other incidents along the corridor. So how does the 85 study plan to help? It aims to recommend a series of projects that will reduce congestion, enhance traffic operations, and improve safety within the roughly 18-mile corridor. At the beginning of the 85 study, project stakeholders helped to craft a vision for the I-85 corridor and agreed on goals for achieving this vision. Within this kind of planning study, a vision is a clear, inspirational, and concise definition of a future position. The vision for this study is I-85 will provide safe, reliable interstate travel for people and goods as part of a connected, efficient transportation network while creating value for surrounding communities. The stakeholders then established 6 key goals to drive the study. Each is important and no one goal outweighs another. The goals in no particular order are shown on the screen. Improve safety, improve vehicular mobility, facilitate commercial travel, evaluate multimodal options, support Georgia's economy, and support the corridor's communities. Throughout the project, the study team is using the Planning and Environmental Linkages process. Sometimes this is called PEL. And it identifies connections between the traditional planning approach and the environmental process. That environmental process is sometimes known as NEPA, which stands for National Environmental Policy Act. As you see here, it's an FHWA initiative. So what is the benefit? Pell aims to get the environmental experts involved from the very beginning, to give them the chance to not only understand what's going on from the start, but also to have the chance to provide their input and to provide consensus on decision making. During the traditional process, it's not uncommon for some decisions to be made during the planning phase. And then during the NEPA phase, they must be revisited, retested, and redone. Pell allows that consensus to be made together in the planning phase. We're also excited to note that the I85 Pell study is the very first Pell study in Georgia. We have already begun working with FHWA. We have already included the public and stakeholders in new ways. And as you'll see on the next slide, we've already begun working together on key decision making. You can see the many benefits that stem from this approach, from time and cost savings to better use of funding. And the public can be more involved. Another key thing to understand about Pell is that it's not a separate report or a separate result that you work on. Instead, it's embedded into every part of the planning process. All right, stakeholders. Stakeholders have been an integral part of this study. This slide shows just a fraction of the many stakeholders that we've had the privilege of involving throughout the last couple of years. As you can see here, stakeholders for the study include representatives from government agencies at all levels, as well as businesses and community groups, both within, along the study corridor, and the surrounding areas. Each stakeholder group provides diverse experience, insight, and institutional knowledge into the study process. The first phase of public involvement began in November of 2019 and concluded in February of 2020. 3 primary engagement tools were used for phase 1 public engagement, and those are in-person meetings, community events, and an online survey. The activities conducted at the in-person meetings and the community events were mirrored in the online survey. In-person meetings and community events had project-related collateral translated into 4 languages: English, Spanish, Korean, and Vietnamese. These are the most widely spoken languages in Gwinnett County. Here you can see some key statistics from phase 1 public outreach. During that time, in-person meetings were conducted with over 64 attendees. Community events engaged 875 people. There were 2,551 survey respondents. Information was distributed to 1,433 email addresses, and the study used many strategies to get the word out. They included billboards, postcards, social media, blogs, newsletters, and media stories. So now, as we continue our conversation, we're going to provide an overview of our study timeline and what we have done so far. The I85 study kicked off in Q1 of 2019. The first major event was in Q2 of 2019 with a visioning meeting. This was followed by phase 1 public outreach and then stakeholder presentations. Currently, the study is in phase 2 public outreach. The study has gone through 2 rounds of stakeholder engagement, 1 public engagement, and is within its 2nd round of public engagement now. Looking to the future, we still have more rounds of screening. Each one will go into more detail with data-driven analyses. All of this will culminate in a recommendation of a package of projects and then an implementation plan. The study uses a 3-tiered evaluation process to screen alternatives and then to develop recommended projects for future implementation. It all starts with a rigorous idea generation process, and you'll hear more about that and its results in the next slides. Each tier, alternatives are evaluated using a set of performance measures to determine whether they'll address the transportation need of the corridor, then how well they address those needs, and how well the alternatives will work together. Over 1,200 ideas were collected during that idea generation phase of the study. These ideas came from 4 sources, which you see here: previous plans and studies, public involvement and stakeholder input, hotspot and corridor strategies, and innovation team workshops. The development of the universe of idea marked the first step in a much longer screening process, which consists of 3 tiers. The process for generating ideas leaves no idea off the table, allowing the universe of ideas to be as inclusive, comprehensive, and extensive as possible. The goal of the universe of ideas is to identify alternatives for further evaluation. We're going to talk a little bit about hotspots, and within this study, hotspots are areas located throughout the corridor that significantly contribute to congestion, incident, crashes, or other notable issues. They take the results of our detailed study of the existing conditions and the expected future conditions along the corridor and summarize the findings into a high-level map. By addressing the unique challenges within each of these hotspots, the operation of the corridor will improve. The hotspots, which you'll see on the next slide, were developed based on data and identified through collaborative workshops with participants from various disciplines that include planning, environmental, traffic, and roadway design. So, to help get you oriented on this map, north is to your right. There are 13 hotspots here, and they were identified along the width of the 85 study area. They have the largest impact on operations for the I85 corridor. Therefore, identifying improvements that target these areas will yield the greatest benefits to the corridor. The blue shapes represent northbound hotspots, and the green shapes represent the southbound hotspots. The alternatives evaluated in Tier 1 were developed through the universe of ideas. The study team initially screened the ideas for fatal flaws to ensure each one tries to address one of the study's transportation needs. So one example of a fatal flaw would be if a proposed idea were too far away from the study area and did not influence the I85 corridor. The ideas that did pass the screening were then consolidated into Tier 1 alternatives that advanced to Tier 1 screening. Those alternatives were organized into 6 categories, which are shown here: managed lane system improvements, freeway and interchange improvements, arterial improvements, multimodal options, policy changes and smart infrastructure, and finally add-on improvements. So with that, I'd like to hand it back over to Kara to tell us a little bit about the 85 Study public meeting website. Kara?
Thanks, Jonathan. So right now we are in our second phase of analysis and screening. And that means that we will have 2 more rounds of results before we make any final recommendations or begin implementation. We'll continue to incorporate Pell and gain public input through public and stakeholder engagement. And this is where you come in. So what we'd like to do now is walk through where you can provide feedback and you can take a survey and give us your input to contribute to the study. So the first step is to go to the project website and browse the virtual meeting rooms. Here you can explore our displays and videos that we would typically share at an in-person meeting. All the information you should need can be found in each of these rooms. The best place to start is the welcome room, where you will find a welcome video, which offers a great overview of the website and tips for navigating the space. Here you can also review fact sheets and our efforts to date. Next, move over to room 2 to review the Tier 1 screening materials. And this includes the evaluation framework, screening methodology, and purpose. So once you review the background rooms, you can move on to rooms 3 through 6. Here you will see the current alternatives. Room 3 covers the managed lane categories. Room 4, the freeway and interchange categories. And make sure you click on each of the easels to view all of the information. Now move on to room 5, where you will see the arterial categories, and then room 6, which includes policy changes, as well as bicycle, pedestrian, and transit improvements. Once you have viewed all the alternatives, visit room 7. Here you can check out the next steps for the project, but most importantly, we would like for you to provide your feedback by either leaving a comment or completing the survey. The survey link will take you to the MetroQuest survey. Here you will be able to share your opinions on priority locations and the alternatives. Your input is crucial to the success of this study, and completing the survey is a quick way to make your voice heard. And once you've completed the survey, please make sure to stay connected with us. Comment, share your thoughts on our social media channels, use the hashtag 85study, and make sure you let others know as well. So we have now reached the portion of our presentation today for Q&A, but I do want to go back over our tips again before we get started. So you again will remain muted to reduce the risk of background noise. However, throughout this session, you can submit your questions using the Microsoft Teams Live Q&A feature. We urge you to keep your questions concise and specific to this project. Also, please use appropriate language. If we happen to not be able to get to your question today, or that it involves a more detailed technical response than we're able to provide, don't worry. We will follow up with you using the contact information you provide. But keep in mind, if you use the option to ask a question anonymously and we don't get your question during this session, we won't have a way to contact you back. So please provide your name and email address when submitting a question. Also, please note that all comments submitted will be part of the public record, and there will also be a recording posted on the website listed below by Thursday, September 2nd. Also, I just wanted to add again that if there are any elected officials joining us today, please send us your name and office in the chat for our records. And we wanted to review these features again. If you need to access closed captioning or subtitles, navigate to the bottom of your screen to the closed caption icon, click it on to turn captions on or off, and then change the language, click the gear next to it, and select Caption Subtitles to choose your language of choice. And then also, if you would prefer to ask questions in another language, please feel free to call one of these designated numbers. You will be asked to leave a voicemail and someone will return your call. So now we are going to start the question portion of our meeting today. And I am going to begin reading these questions, and Jonathan is going to be assisting me with answering them. So I will be receiving them through. Okay, here is our first one. So the exit for 985 North is both poorly designed, congested, and dangerous. Traffic continues to get more congested, and motorists using HOV lanes as well as the left-hand exit creates driver confusion. What are the plans to review this exit? Jonathan?
Absolutely. That's a good question. And in a moment, I'll throw this over to one of our subject matter experts, Otto Clemente, to help answer. But it's definitely something that we want to be thinking about, right? We want to understand not only where we feel things are congested and dangerous, but also we want to be sure we understand where there's driver confusion. And so these are things that we're looking at within the study and that we want to address through this process that we talked about a few minutes ago. To talk a little bit more about the details of this specific location and what we're looking at there, I'm going to hand it over to Otto. Otto?
Thanks, Jonathan. This is a very good question. 985 interchange is something that we are looking at as part of this study. You can see an alternative for it inside the virtual room. It's called alternative 232. And there's a couple of things that we're looking at in that alternative. One of them would be considering turning that from a left-hand exit to 985 to a right-hand exit. We know the Lawrenceville-Swanee Road interchange is very close to the 985 interchange. So we'll be looking at things called CD lanes that help kind of distribute how the ramps work over there so that there's more spacing in between the on-ramps and off-ramps so that there's more time for motorists to make those lane changes that they need to make over there. So those are a couple of the ideas that we're looking at the 985 interchange. I encourage you to go into our virtual rooms. It's alternative 232, and it's in the freeway and interchange rooms. So go in there, take a look at what we're proposing. We have a couple ideas in there, and then be sure to give us your feedback in the next steps room inside our virtual meeting space. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Otto and Jonathan. So we are going to get to our next question, and it should be coming in right now. So, okay, maybe you will cover this, and I realize GDOT focus is on interstates. However, how about relieving pressure on I85 by developing more high-capacity north-south state routes in Gwinnett that already exist? Buford Highway, 141. Peachtree Industrial would be a great route to develop into a limited access road to get people north-south and become somewhat of an alternative for local traffic instead of pushing to I-85. 141 at 285 is a perfect example of this. I know PIB is not a state route the whole way through Gwinnett, but it would be a great alternative. Jonathan, can you give us your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. So first of all, I want to say thank you for the ideas here. We, as a part of this public engagement, are definitely interested in hearing your ideas for solutions, and we can incorporate those thoughts if they're not already in there into the study. So thank you for sharing these ideas here. Specifically, there were 6 parallel routes, different alternatives that were evaluated within Tier 1. One of the alternatives was improving Buford Highway, one of them improving Lawrenceville Highway, 3 of them improving Peachtree Industrial Boulevard, and 1 improving SR20 at Buford Drive. At this point, those alternatives are not recommended for advancement to Tier 2 based on travel modeling conducted by the study team. However, we do continue to evaluate other options, and we'll certainly take that comment into consideration. So thank you for that, and that was a good question.
Thanks, Jonathan. So we are going to see what our next question coming in is. Okay, how many tons of CO2 and equivalent emissions will the new lanes generate over the coming decades due to induced demand? Jonathan?
All right, thank you. Yes, another good question, and certainly see where the concern is coming from there. In a moment, I'll let Robin Stevens take the deeper response here, but we definitely want to be sure that we understand what the implications of building any new lanes are, and that is a part of our study. That's something that we're going to look at. So, Robin, I'll let you dive into a little bit of the details behind this. Robin?
Thank you, Jonathan. Air quality is a very important factor in all of GDOT's projects. When a project is identified for programming and the NEPA process starts, a detailed air quality analysis will be conducted. At this time, we're just doing the planning. And right now we're in the Tier 1 process, and air quality has not yet been factored into the Tier 1, but in subsequent tiers, particularly Tier 2, we will be looking at factors such as vehicle hours of delay as a proxy for an increase and decrease in emissions. But at this time, we can't quantify air quality emissions from the projects that we at this stage in development. Thank you for your question.
Thanks, Robin. So we are going to move to our next question that is coming in right now. How long will it take for induced demand to fill any new lanes back up, or else show worse traffic where limited toll lanes dump into the local network? Jonathan?
All right, another good question, and once again, an opportunity for Otto to give us some specifics. But like we were saying with some of the other questions, we need to understand the impact of what we're building. And it's not uncommon that when a lane is built, that creates more demand for traffic to come and use it. So this question is acknowledging that fact that if we're creating more infrastructure, there may be more demand for them to use that. So to give us an answer on that, Otto, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Jonathan. Induced demand is something we as traffic planners and traffic engineers and transportation planners take a look at all the time when we look at projects like this where we're adding new capacity. And so when we run our models, those take a look at those that ability for projects to bring more demand to a study area. We do know that when we run models like this and we run projects where we have managed lanes versus general purpose lanes, we know that the amount of induced demand is less when we implement managed lanes versus general purpose lanes. When we take a look at these projects, we look at both what happens on the interstate, and then we also take a look at seeing what happens on the arterial networks. And so that's why when you look at the alternatives that we're reviewing as part of this study, it's not just alternatives about the interstate. We're taking a look at the arterial network. We'll take a look at policies. We'll take a look at multimodal options. So all of those we're going to look at those together and see how all of those things help affect the demand on the corridor. Thanks for that question.
Thanks, Otto. So we have our next question coming in. What are the short-term and long-term plans for improving and then possibly replacing the Pleasant Hill Road I-85 interchange? Jonathan?
All right, thank you. This will be another chance for Otto to take a little bit more into the details for us. But I want to acknowledge, I think that this is a good question because part of what we're doing in this study is not only looking at long-term improvements. We want to focus on improvements that will happen over the course of the short term, the medium term, and the long term. And that gives us the opportunity to provide relief where possible as soon as possible, and then scale that up as the larger recommendation of package of projects begins to take shape. So that's part of something we'll look at in our implementation plan after we have formulated that package of recommended projects. To give us a little bit more detail about this area, Otto, I'll let you take it away.
Thanks, Jonathan. This is another good question. Pleasant Hill Road interchange is something we are also looking at as part of the study. If folks can go to alternative 226, that's in the freeway and interchange improvements room. That will have some more information about some of the things we're looking at the Pleasant Hill Road interchange. We are looking to put some type of new type of interchange in there. We're looking at a couple different ideas. We're going to be doing that in the next tier, in tier 2. And so we're looking at different ideas over there. And as Jonathan mentioned, as we look at ideas at that interchange, we'll be thinking about long-term and short-term, medium-term. Are there ideas that that make sense to implement in the short term, and how would those things help us to get there to that long-term solution for that interchange? So again, take a look at alternative 226. That's in the freeway and interchange room inside our virtual public meeting rooms, and take a look at what we have there. And then again, I encourage folks to take the survey in the next steps room, and that'll give you an opportunity to weigh in on these ideas. Thanks very much for this question.
Thanks, Otto. It's a great point. We want to be sure, we love all these questions and comments, and we also want to be sure people are going to take the survey, so we encourage you to do so after this meeting. So next question, the merge weave of the hot lane when 85 and 316 converge is a serious problem. At times, the hot lane backup on 85 extends past the dashed lane entry exit. Jonathan, do you have some thoughts on that?
Sure, absolutely. And also, Otto, please feel free to weigh in on this in a moment as well. But we want to take a look at the hot lanes that are currently existing and in operation, as well as other types of managed lanes alternatives that may be considered as part of this study. As a part of that, one of the things that we'll look at is the entry and exit, as well as the access to that. We want to be sure that the conditions that we propose are safe conditions that allow for a fluid movement into and out of those systems. We want to avoid things like weaving and any challenges that may make it an unsafe or undesirable system to use. So for a little bit more about this question, Otto, I'll let you tell us a little bit about our recommended alternative, or not recommended, excuse me, our alternatives in this area.
Thanks, Jonathan, again. And again, a very good question, and a location that is very important to us, and something else that we're looking at. We have an alternative. It's called alternative 242, and that looks at that 316 I85 interchange. It's something that we are advancing from tier 1 into tier 2. The merge of the hot lane is one of the things that we're looking at as part of that. And we're taking a look at how the general purpose lanes also merge into there. And we're also taking a look at how the hot access point could probably be changed or modified to, again, help with that merging condition. So all of those things are under consideration in tier 2. It's something we've heard about very early on in this study about how that merge works. And so our study team knows that this is an important thing to look at, and we're going to be looking at it in tier 2. And many of the things that are brought up in this question, we've heard from stakeholders and from others about this issue. So again, thanks for this question.
Thank you all, and we have more questions coming in. Thank you all for these great questions, and please keep submitting them. Our next question is, can you address transit and rail freight improvements under consideration? Jonathan?
Absolutely. Thank you for this question. It's a very good question. And as you may remember, when we were speaking about the categories that we're looking at as a part of this study, and I'll remind you what those are in a moment, multimodal options is one of those categories. So I'll let Christina Pastor give us an answer on this in just a moment. But just as a reminder, in addition to things like managed lane systems, freeway and interchange improvements, and arterial improvements, multimodal options is another one of the 6 categories in addition to policy changes in smart infrastructure and add-on improvements. So multimodal options, including transit, and then also a variety of different things that we'll look at freight are also included within what we're looking at throughout the overall study. So for a little bit more on that, Christina, I'll hand it to you.
Thanks, Jonathan. So the study is including a wide range of different transit alternatives, everything from various rail options to bus rapid transit and arterial rapid transit, as well as buses operating in and around the managed lane system. So we're looking at a myriad of different projects. Those have come from a number of different places, including the Gwinnett County Transit Plan that is currently standing, and the county is committed to continuing to find new ways to fund transit opportunities. So they'll be looking at some new opportunities. We also have a number of options that came in from our first round of public engagement. And so all of those different ideas are in the process of being evaluated in this next upcoming tier. So we can definitely stay tuned on that. There are also a number of different policy alternatives that are being considered, specifically targeted toward rail freight movement in general. So thanks so much for your question.
Great, thank you, Christina. So we have our next question coming in. Let's see, the hot volume from 316 is tiny compared to 85, and it only extends about a mile anyway. Shouldn't consideration be given to closing the 316 hot lane inbound only and allow those people to enter hot from Sugarloaf 85? Jonathan?
All right, so thank you for that question. This will be an opportunity for Jennifer Zahn to give us a little bit of insight on what's going on with the study and what we're looking at for different kind of managed lane options. But yes, we want to look at these kinds of challenges and these kinds of questions. The hot lanes that are existing right now are important, and we want to be sure that we know what the future of that kind of improvement would look like for the 85 corridor. So Jennifer, I'll hand it over to you.
Hey, Jennifer, you are on mute.
Can you hear me now? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. As Jonathan mentioned, we are looking at a variety of the managed lane options for the I85 corridor. Some of those related to the system improvements, and then that will include the commercial vehicle lanes as well as widening the existing high-street lanes and providing the barrier to separate those lanes to provide that travel efficiency. So you can get more information from the room 3 in the virtual public meeting space to see more little options for the under the managed lane side. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. So we have another question that has come in. What is being considered for freight only or freight restricted lanes? Jonathan?
All right, a lot of good questions coming in about freight today. Appreciate that. This will be another opportunity for Jennifer to talk to us about what we're doing, not only with managed lanes, but how freight integrates into those considerations. So Jennifer, I'll hand this right back over to you.
Sure. As I mentioned, we actually have multiple different options with the commercial vehicle lanes considered for the entire corridor. For the managed lanes alternatives already advanced in the tier 2 analysis, there are 3 alternatives that including the commercial vehicle lanes. One is adding commercial vehicle lanes, 2 lanes in each direction for the entire corridor without adding or widening the current Hot-Street Plus lanes. And then there are 2 other options also considered the commercial vehicle lanes. As I mentioned, you can actually find more information. There are some typical sections provided to show what those alternatives look like. But then those were illustrative purpose only, and then we're doing a more detailed analysis to figure out the typical sections for those alternatives. Thank you for the question.
So we are going to take our next question now. Having only one hot lane is a problem. Every other managed lane in Metro Atlanta is 2 lanes. Can't we convert to 2 lanes so passing stalled cars, police on the shoulder would be safer? This would also encourage more general purpose lane users to use hot and express transit in the hot lanes. It could then also be barrier separated, making it much safer. Jonathan, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And Jennifer, I'd also like to hear what you have to say after I say a few things here. But yes, we want to look at that existing hot lane and what it would look like to expand that. That's not a guarantee that that is the option that will be recommended, but we're going to take a close look at that. The person who asked this question has some good thoughts on here about being able to police the area in a more safe environment, being sure that a stalled car does not delay people to be able to use the system, and considerations like that. I know Jennifer just mentioned that there are typicals, these typical sections that's going to help you to understand and see what those lanes might look like. And that's all within the study room. So please feel free to go over there and take a look at those as well. But Jennifer, anything that you'd like to add to that in addition to what I just said?
I feel we have heard that through our public meetings before. This is very consistent with what we have heard from the community. And then definitely this is some of the things we're looking very closely, not only just to provide this barrier separation, but then also looking at the different access points for this alternative. If you go to the virtual room of the public meeting spaces, 101 is actually exactly what this match lane option is to provide a barrier separated 2 lanes in each direction, and then maybe have a better connectivity to other managed lanes within the Atlanta metro area. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Jennifer. So we are going to read our next question, and I just want to let everybody know to please keep submitting your questions. We really appreciate them, and if you do have any questions or comments, please keep submitting them to the Q&A section. So our next question is traffic exiting I-285 southeastbound at Spaghetti Junction onto I-85 northbound has a terrifying entry merging lane. 2 lanes enter northbound I-85, and almost immediately the inside lane on left is pinched off by the right-hand lane merging into this lane. There is inadequate warning signage, lane arrows that keep people in the right space. As it is now, the left exit lane merges onto I-85 northbound and is squeezed off as the adjacent right exit lane just pushes right in like they own the space. It is very dangerous and terrifying. Jonathan, can you share some thoughts on that one?
Absolutely. So I'd like Otto for you to give your input on this one as well, but I'd like to use this as an opportunity to talk a little bit about something that we're including in this study called human factor analysis. What that human factor analysis does as part of the larger study is it looks at not just how does a vehicle use the roadway, but how do the humans, the people that are driving the vehicles, experience the roadway. It looks at the exact kinds of things that you are concerned about with this question, whether it be an intimidating merging situation, whether it be the signage, whether it be too many things that the road may be throwing at you all at one time. That human factor analysis that we do will be something that we look at as we analyze these other things we've talked about here today, and should take into account the concerns that you're describing here. To give us a little bit more information specifically about this location and these ideas, Otto, do you have anything to add?
Sure, thanks, Jonathan. We are taking a look into this issue. I know from my own personal experience, I understand that same issue that was described in the question. So yes, that is something that is important to look at. We have a group of alternatives called add-on improvements. And in that category, we take a look at small things that we can do, signage, marking that could help improve the situation over there. And I know that was mentioned about the signing and the spacing there. So that is one of the things we're going to take a look at over there. And then also there are some alternatives associated with taking a look at that Spaghetti Junction interchange. There's an alternative 217 and alternative 236. Those are going to take a look at how the ramps are configured over there. They're going to take a look at how the spacing is for them and how they merge in and what can be done to improve those merges and to maybe simplify the weaving behaviors. And they'll all take into account those things that that Jonathan just mentioned about human factors. How do people experience this interchange in a, with a lot of changing lanes, a lot of exits and entries coming in at the same time? Those alternatives are intended to take a look at those issues and see how those merges and the weaving situations can be improved and simplified. Moreover, on top of those two alternatives, we also understand that this works as a system. So sometimes the things that are needed to help that Spaghetti Junction interchange are things that need to happen downstream on 85 northbound. So that's why there's also alternatives taking a look at the interchanges north of there on 85. And there's also alternatives to take a look at auxiliary lanes. So all of those things are going to help with that merging situation. Even things like multimodal options, the managed lanes options, all of those are going to help look, and our goal is to help kind of reduce some of the vehicular demand in that area so that merging can happen better. So all of those are going to have to work together to help take a look at some of these issues that were brought up in that question. So again, thanks for that question.
Thanks, Otto. And thank you all for these questions and these comments. It's been very great to talk through the specifics of what we are looking at in the study. One thing I wanted to quickly revisit when we were talking about managed lanes, and Jonathan, I'd like to hear from you a little bit and the team on this, but can you talk a little bit about the managed lanes and what they mean for transit and the different benefits that transit can see through the managed lanes?
Absolutely. So, Jennifer, I'll be interested to hear a little bit about what you have to say on this as well, but it is not uncommon for managed lanes and transit to go hand in hand. Oftentimes there are common connections and there's an overlap between what they're trying to accomplish and how the solutions are applied. So Jennifer, anything in particular that you'd like to add to talk about how managed lanes and transit may operate together with each other, and then what we're looking at on this study to consider that?
Sure. So we know that the graded express routes, they're using managed lanes to get the origin and destinations. And one of the purpose of the managed lane is really to provide the valuable mobility option to optimize the traffic flow and maximize the traffic efficiency for the users, which including actually transit vehicles. Those transit vehicles and the carpools and the van pools can use those lanes for free. So we have heard the comments about the HOS 3+ lanes currently in operation because it's one lane with buffer access. It might have some bottlenecks and then areas that really impact the operation efficiency along the I85 HOS 3+ lanes. So one of the managed lane alternative, when we have a barrier separation, then it provides more capacity for the users, including the transit services. They can have a better mobility options. They can even have increased frequency and then also increase the ridership. So all of those will be further evaluated in the tier 2, and then we will be providing some quantitative information about the transit benefits for those managed lanes.
Thank you, Jennifer. So please keep submitting your questions and comments if you have them, but I do want to take a moment to talk through the survey a bit, and we may go back and pull up the image of the survey room in the virtual platform so that everyone can see it. But this piece is so important to the study, and feedback and input and community engagement has been so vital to this entire study from start and all the way to the finish of it. So we wanted to talk through, and here's the survey room. When you do go to the virtual platform where you can easily click onto the survey and take it, the MetroQuest survey. But we'd like to talk a little bit about different questions that folks may have about the survey. So if you participated in the first survey, do you need to participate in this one? Jonathan, can I get your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. And I would say we would love for everyone to participate in the survey, even if you participated the first time around. And tell your friends, have them participate. If you have people that you know that drive this corridor, that have suggestions, we want to hear from you, we want to hear from them. The more feedback that we can get, the better we can understand the needs of what are going on in this corridor. There are a lot of things that are happening all at one time. And you can think about that as trying to untie a very complicated knot. There are a lot of different pieces of input, and we would like to hear from you to help understand that. This survey is one of the best ways for us to be able to do that. And I'll just reiterate, the first survey, if you participated, that was great. We have used that information all the way through up until now. And this is our next chance to see, okay, now that you told us this last time, now how can we build on that? So whether you took it before or whether this is your first time, please give us your thoughts. We will take those to heart, and they will certainly help steer the remainder of the study.
Thank you, Jonathan. Absolutely. And just so everybody knows, the survey will be live until September 3rd. So we have some time for people to go and take the survey. And as we mentioned earlier, please share with your coworkers, your neighbors, your friends, and ask them to come take the survey. And that leads me to another question that I'd like to ask you, Jonathan, is if you don't live in the corridor, is it okay to still go and take the survey?
Oh yeah, absolutely, without a doubt. One of the things that's interesting and unique about this corridor is it has many kinds of users. And we heard questions about freight earlier today. I'm sure we have commuters that are listening to this. And then we heard early in the presentation that there are people who get on the corridor, travel 2 exits, and get off. So there are all kinds of users. We want to hear from everybody. If this is someone who is traveling through Atlanta and they've driven this corridor, we would like their input. We would like to hear that kind of feedback from anyone who has had the chance to use the corridor, regardless of whether they live in the corridor area or Gwinnett County, the whole Metro Atlanta, or like I said, anyone that is using this corridor. From a freight perspective, we may have people who drive commercial vehicles that they're just passing through the city. But if they would like to go take the survey, we would love to hear from them and hear their feedback. So it's open to anyone and everyone who has used the corridor or plans to use the corridor. Great question. Thank you, Kara.
Thank you, Jonathan. And so folks may be wondering, how long does the survey take to take? It actually is up to you. It can take 5 minutes, or you can spend more time providing your comments and feedback. So really the survey is what you make of it, but we would love for you to go and give us your feedback and your level of interest in these particular pieces that we're looking at through this survey and this study. So please, when you have the opportunity, take the opportunity to go look at the survey and give us your feedback as much as you would like. One good question, Jonathan, that I'd like to kick to you too is how will these study results be used? And if folks would like to see what the comments or the survey results are after the survey closes, how can they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll tackle that second part first. So how can they see the results of the survey, or really any of the results that we're producing as a part of the study? I will reiterate that the study website, 85study.com, is the best way to go and to find any information about the study. As we reach key milestones, new information will be published. And so check back often. We have a mailing list, an email mailing list that you can also sign up for, but that website is really the best opportunity or the best place to go for that. Carrie, the other part of your question was about how will this information be used? So we talked about the Pell process earlier and how important it is to understand not only the planning portion, but also the environmental or the NEPA portion. And within a Pell study, what we try and do is marry those two ideas earlier in the process to bring them together and connect them so that we're making decisions related to both planning and NEPA at the same time. One of the biggest, most important parts of a NEPA study or a NEPA process is to understand the impacts to the public and to hear public feedback. And so just like public feedback is important during the NEPA phase of any project, it's very important for us as a Pell study to hear from you so that that can influence how we go about understanding the different issues in the corridor and how they may impact the people who are using it. So as a part of our Pell study, we have much more opportunities to hear from you than we would another traditional planning study. So we're excited about that. Very good question. Thanks for that.
Thanks so much, Jonathan. I guess piggybacking on that, and you did kind of address it, but can you talk a little bit about the next steps for public engagement through the end of the study?
Absolutely. And Christina, I'd actually like to hear your thoughts on this as well. But as we move forward, we talked about the 3 tiers of screening that we're working towards. And then after that screening, we have a recommendation of a package of projects. We try to have something along the way to include the public as we work through the process. And so we have adapted due to the current environments. You see, we're doing things virtually, and that gives us more opportunity to hear from people. But Christina, if you can maybe share with us some of the specific things that we'll be doing moving forward to involve the public and how they can expect to hear from us and be involved in the future. Any thoughts on that, Christina?
Absolutely. Thanks, Jonathan. And actually, I might even ask or answer a question that you didn't ask. In addition to our engagement with the public, you saw a slide earlier about our engagement of our stakeholder communities. And our stakeholders serve us as a sounding board to really help make sure that as we're going through the process, that we're understanding the perspectives of the communities that they represent. And so in addition to working with the public along the way, we are going to be meeting even more frequently with our stakeholder groups to vet some different questions and ask to make sure we're going in the right direction as we move forward. So in addition to those stakeholder engagement opportunities, we will be coming back out to the public, as Jonathan mentioned, once we start putting these projects together. So you're seeing individual projects right now, but ideally then we'll be putting them into packages of projects and coming back out to the public to get your feedback on those different packages of projects. And so there will be an opportunity to engage then, and potentially then at the end of the process, once we have a final recommended plan to be able to move forward, there will be more input along the way. And throughout the process, in addition to these types of meetings, whether they be virtual or in person, we'll have other opportunities to engage through social media, and our email address is always alive. And so you can always send us an email at any point in the process. And ideally, we'll have some different things and pop-ups throughout where you will be able to engage with us in person. So definitely stay tuned if you don't follow us on social media or have submit your email address. Make sure to do that, and we can keep you updated on all of the opportunities to engage. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. That was great. One thing I want to, since we're talking a lot about the feedback that we'd like to get from folks who are here today and out in the community and our stakeholders, I'd like to, Jonathan, have you talk a little bit more about the specifics of the alternatives that when folks go to the virtual platform, what will they see? And I was thinking, like, let's start with the freeway and interchange improvements. Can you talk about some of those specific items that we're looking at in that category?
Yeah, absolutely. Otto, I'd love to hear your input on this as well. But when you navigate to this virtual page, you're going to see all kinds of different options that we are looking at right now. And Kara, I think you mentioned the freeway and interchange improvements. So specifically, not only do we understand that to improve the I85 corridor, not only do we need to look at corridor-wide capacity adding solutions, but we also need to look at these spot locations. We need to understand what's happening at areas that are already congested, areas that are already experiencing challenges whether those are congestion relation operations, and how those interface with I-85. So when we look at the corridor, we want to look at all of that. We talked a little bit about hotspots earlier. When you're looking at the virtual public meeting room, you can look for anything related to the hotspots that show those locations and how they can be improved. And you'll see that within those, that the interchange type of improvements can also provide that kind of relief at the different hotspots. So Otto, curious if you have anything more that you would like to add on that about specific interchange and location improvements.
Sure, thanks, Jonathan. So when you do go inside that virtual meeting space, there's going to be a room called Freeway and Interchange Improvements. If you look inside there, you're going to see all those different things that Jonathan was talking about. We split those up into a couple different categories. Under the freeway improvement side, you'll see alternatives that talk about auxiliary lanes, hard shoulder running, collector distributor lanes, and auxiliary lanes. So those are all basically kind of spot improvements that we can do on the freeway. All of those are types of improvements that help with how traffic enters and exits the freeway and kind of helps simplify how the traffic merges and how the traffic then exits. So all those alternatives deal with those types of situations, and we're looking at several different interchanges along the way to do that. You'll also see inside that room interchange improvements. So those are taking a look at a specific interchange and looking at it from both how it interacts with the freeway and then how it interacts with the arterial. So something like looking at the Jimmy Carter interchange. What can you do over there to help improve that interface from both the arterial side and the freeway side? So you'll see inside that room all of those different details of the alternatives we're looking at over there. So you'll see a board that kind of explains all those different concepts, auxiliary lanes, CD lanes. There's some explanations about how those work. There's an explanation of different types of interchange designs. You can see that inside that room. And you'll also see a list of those interchange and freeway improvement projects that we're recommending to move forward from Tier 1 to Tier 2. And for every one of those projects that we're looking at, you'll see a fact sheet for it, and you'll see a little bit more information about how that alternative performed when we analyzed it in Tier 1, and you'll see just kind of a little bit of a longer description of how that alternative would work. So I encourage folks to check out that virtual meeting room, go to the freeway and interchange rooms, and you can see all those different ideas that we're looking at for that. Thanks.
Thank you, Otto. So also, like along that same line, I wanted us to talk a little bit about the arterial improvements we're considering. Can you guys talk a little bit about that? Jonathan, I'll start with you.
Sure, absolutely. Arterial improvements are definitely an important thing to consider here. Sometimes when people think of a corridor study like this, they immediately think of the interstate corridor. You think about I-85 and what can we do to improve that? And yes, that's important. Yes, the interchanges that we just spoke about are also important, but we also need to look at any of the larger roads in and around the study area, and that's what we call arterial roads. These are the ones that maybe cross the corridor or are parallel to the corridor, and we want to take the opportunity to see not only what are the improvements along that I-85 corridor, but also what are the impacts. Whether it's how the arterial functions and that impacts 85, or also just being cognizant of the idea that changes to I-85 may also influence those arterials that are directly related to or connected to I-85. So we take a close look at that, and you can see that that is one of the categories that's included. So again, please feel free to go check out our virtual meeting room. You can go to 85study.com. And you can take a look at the room materials specifically related to arterials. And after you've done that, please take our survey. And if there's information that you think that we need to know, again, on that 85study.com, there is a link. Just click that and you'll go right to the survey that Kara was sharing with us before. We want to hear about your thoughts on anything, everything from managed lanes to interchanges to arterial roads, whether it has to do with multimodal options, policy, smart infrastructure, any of that. All of that is contained within this study, and we'd like to hear your feedback on it. Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. Can I piggyback on that one a little bit and just have you talk a little bit about the multimodal options as well as the policy and smart infrastructure options that are being considered?
Sure, absolutely. So, Jennifer, I think I'll throw the multimodal to you in just a moment. But as far as the policy and the smart infrastructure, we know that the technology that currently exists right now is not the same technology that's going to exist a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now. Things are advancing at a fast clip, and we need to understand what is that smart infrastructure? What are those options that could be technology-related improvements that could be installed throughout the corridor or that may have an influence on how the corridor operates? So we're taking a close look at that. When we get further into the study and we start looking at the packages of projects, we'll look at different potential outcomes in the future and how different future outcomes may influence the operation of the corridor. Policy is also something that's included in there. Sometimes decision-making can influence how a corridor is used or how certain things are applied within a corridor. So we have also identified that as part of one of our categories to ensure that any kind of policy decisions that may be made about the 85 corridor would be included with the consideration that we have in this study. So definitely go check out that room at the virtual public meeting room. And again, you can access that at 85study.com. Jennifer, anything you want to add to that as far as the managed lanes go?
Yeah, so related to the emerging technology, that's definitely some of the things that we are considering for this study related to the multimodal options. I will let Christina to chime in a little bit later. But with the emerging technology, we definitely consider that from the policy perspective, and even with the managed lanes, some of the things we're going to do in the later tier of the analysis is to do a scenario testing, which actually consider the emerging technology related to the connected vehicles, electrical vehicles, and how those emerging technology is going to have impacts in terms of alternatives and the recommendation we're looking for this corridor. Christina will talk a little bit more about the multimodal options.
Excellent. Thanks, Jennifer. Yes. So as I mentioned earlier, when it comes to transit projects, we are looking at a number of different types of transit projects, both along, like within the actual 85 right-of-way as well as parallel to it. Relative to that, we're also looking at station locations where those might be, and particularly how the 85 system would be able to provide access, whether it be from the managed lanes or from the general purpose lane. So we're looking at all of those things relative to transit. Additionally, we're also looking at bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. And I know a lot of people sometimes might think, you know, those are long commute trips to be doing on maybe as a pedestrian or a cyclist, but really there are a number of short trips that are happening along the corridor. And if you remember from earlier in the conversation, Jonathan talked about some of our goals, really connecting the communities around the 85 corridor is also a priority. So there's a lot of opportunities to consider how we might be able to make some of those localized connections on both for bicycles and pedestrians through this project as well. So thanks so much for that question.
Thank you, Christina. So I think we have another question coming in, and I just want to encourage everybody who is still with us today, if you have any questions, we are getting close to the end of our meeting, and we would love to answer any questions or respond to any comments that you have before we get to the close of the meeting. One of the things that we have gotten a question about is please restate how I find the survey. So we are going to pull back up the image from the presentation, and this image is from the actual virtual platform. You do go to the 85 study website, and when you are there, you can click into the virtual platform where you will see all of the rooms that we went through during the presentation. And there is the survey at the end. So when you get to that next steps room at the very end, you will see a couple of opportunities to provide feedback, and that does include the MetroQuest survey. So that is on the 85 study website in the virtual platform. So please go there to review, and here you can actually see the MetroQuest survey, and you can click through the different pages to offer feedback on all of the alternatives that you've heard the team discuss today. So it's been great to hear more details about all of these alternatives that are being considered. And here is where you can provide your feedback on each one of those and each one of those areas. And then also at the end, there's a place for you to provide some additional information with the survey. So we encourage everyone here who has participated today to go take the survey. Please encourage folks that you know to take the survey. And we are here to continue answering questions. We will be reviewing this information and following up as we take in these comments and the survey. So we definitely appreciate everybody's participation today. If anybody has any more questions or comments, please feel free to include them in the chat now. If not, I will kick it over to Jonathan just for a minute and just to see, Jonathan, is there any other kind of wrap up or things we may want to highlight as part of the study as people go to take the survey? Any kind of final thoughts?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that this has been a great discussion. We've had a lot of good questions that range, excuse me, that range from discussions about managed lanes to freight, to the different kinds of improvements all throughout the corridor in the study. You've gotten to hear about our process, which we are in the middle of following and are excited to complete. So I think it's been a great conversation, a great discussion, and we are always open to hearing from you. I know it's been mentioned a couple times here already, but the 85study.com is your best source. I would say if you need to reach out to us in addition to taking the survey, there is an email address, and that is 85study@dot.ga.gov. You can always reach out to us there, and you can find that on the study website as well if you're looking for that. We do want to hear from you, even if we're not in a public involvement phase of the study. That doesn't mean you can't reach out to us with your ideas, your thoughts, your concerns or considerations. So we certainly appreciate everybody that's been here today and the questions that we have received, and we'll continue to keep you involved in the future.
Thank you, Jonathan. And thank you to the whole study team for being here today and providing this information. And thank you to all of our attendees. Just again, wanted to point you to the website and to the email address that Jonathan just described. And as we close out today, we want to invite another one of the study partners, Gwinnett County, and Andrew Thompson to close us out today. Andrew?
Hi, I'm Andrew Thompson with the Gwinnett County DOT. I want to thank you for joining us today for this public meeting on the I85 Pell study. Your participation and input really help us deliver successful projects that enhance the community. If you have further questions or comments, visit our website at I85study.com or contact us via email at I85study@dot.ga.gov. And please share this information in the survey with your coworkers, neighbors, friends, and family. With the community's partnership, we can continue making transportation better together. Stay well and safe. Thanks.